Joining me on the line at the moment to talk about the latest sowing guide. It's out now for our producers across Victoria. We're joined by Agriculture Victoria's project leader, Sarah Brown. G'day, Sarah. How are you going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Really well, thank you. Thanks for joining us to have a bit of a chat about the Victorian Crop Sowing Guide for 2022. I imagine it's been a fair bit of work putting this together.
It has been, yes.
Now, your role as project leader for this sowing guide, what does it mean? What do you actually do?
So I put together the whole guide from the get-go. So I make a start sort of mid-May every year, start reaching out to all of my contributors, the people that tell me what varieties are going to be grown or whether they want to remove some varieties and, start updating disease ratings and that sort of stuff. It really sort of ramps up around July.
How do you put it together, I guess? You mentioned some of the contributors to the sowing guide that you make contact with. You've obviously got partners in organisations like GRDC, but how do you go about putting together a guide of this scope, and where does the information for it come from?
So I really rely on the contribution from Agriculture Victoria experts in research and pathology, independent researchers, universities, other state departments, and then the marketing and breeding companies as well. And they give me as much information as they can for the specific varieties in regards to agronomic characteristics, yield performance, disease ratings, what's suited to local production conditions and all of that sort of stuff. And then I update with all of the NVT yield performance as well for the last 5 years for all of the varieties included.
Sure. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot of technical data that goes into this, and you've got to collate it all and then put it together in a useful guide for producers. But why is it that producers pay such close attention to this guide every year when it comes out? What does it provide them in terms of a practical help for them in their business?
So we encourage growers to use this particular publication as a guide for them to then take it to their consultants or advisors or marketing agents and have a discussion with them about what varieties would be suitable for them to grow for the next season.
If you're a producer in the Mallee and you've got a crop guide that you've produced from Agriculture Victoria, you've had a look at what trial sites and what varieties are going well and their disease profile of the region and whatnot, your guide actually allows these guys to have a look at all of the technical data behind it and make an educated selection as to what particular variety will be best for them to grow in the coming season in their area, right?
That's correct. So the guide really drills down into some of that specific information in regards to agronomic characteristics, yield performance and disease ratings to make sure that the varieties that are in the guide can help a grower to make an informed decision on what's going to grow best in their region.
Any danger of you guys at Agriculture Victoria and the GRDC getting together, putting your heads together and coming up with a mice-resistant strain that we could grow comfortably without having to worry about it?
I think you'd probably have to talk to GRDC and the breeding companies for that one.
We could live in hope. But the reality is disease profile is what it's all about. And look, my next question, I'm probably going to answer it myself in the actual question, but disease profiles are the things that change the most from region to region, from year to year. Outside of that, does the guide change much year on year? How far does the research take us? And are there some consistencies throughout regions that are in that crop guide every year, year in, year out?
So the information that goes into the guide is mostly the same year in, year out. It just will change in regards to, as you mentioned, disease resistance ratings. They change all the time. So it's really important that although we try to keep the most current disease resistance ratings in the guide as it's produced, they will be updated in March 2022. So it's really important for growers to go and get the latest cereal and pulse disease guides in early March before sowing to make sure that they're checking out what the latest disease resistance ratings are. Most of the information, as I said, is consistent across the years, but it may change as older varieties are dropped out, ones that aren't really grown much anymore, and as new varieties come in. And then sometimes there's new research and stuff that they want to add in, such as a couple of years ago adding in some phenology data for the cereals.
Yeah, it makes sense that that's the case. I mean, for example, if you get a 10-day weather forecast and you're a farmer and you're trying to plan your harvest, I mean, if you look at the 10-day forecast and see what's coming up in 10 days' time, there's a fair chance you're going to check that weather guide again if it says it's going to rain in 10 days' time, maybe on the day that it was predicted it was going to rain. You're not just going to take that as gospel. So you always want the latest information, the latest data, right?
Correct, yeah.
Now, when it comes to this guide, how you put it together and where people can find it, I mean, we'll get to where people can find it in a tick, but the trial sites that you guys have scattered around different parts of the state that you work together with, places like the GRDC on, clearly that is a wealth of data that gets fed into this guide. Is that right?
That's correct. So all of that yield performance comes through the National Variety Trial Program.
And that National Variety Trial Program data is fully outlined in the guide, but it's also available on its own in various different places, isn't it? For example, the GRDC, they keep pretty close tabs on all of that sort of stuff.
They do. So our sowing guide will outlay the 5-year average performance of those varieties that are included. But on the NVT website, you can really drill down into comparing specific varieties, or you can look at the more local regions. The
most important question I can ask you today is, where do you find it? for the farmer out there, I mean, that they will know probably, but for your average producer agronomist, where do you actually get a copy of the Victorian Crop Sowing Guide for 2022?
So for anybody who is a GRDC ground cover subscriber, they will receive a hard copy version of the guide in the mail at the end of October every year. But it is also available on the GRDC website as well.
My last question for you today, now that we know where to get the guide from, what's the thing in the guide this year that has excited or piqued your interest the most? Is it a particular variety? What's the thing that we should be looking out for the most in the guide this year?
I look forward every year to seeing some of the new varieties that come out and the really exciting agronomic characteristics that come through with some of these new varieties every year.
We're looking forward to seeing it as well, Sarah. The sowing guide, it's out now, and make sure you and your agronomist get a hold of it. And great chatting with you about it, Sarah. All the best with your work. Thank you for joining us and telling us a little bit about it today here on Country Viewpoint, and all the best to you.
Great, thank you.